Okay, well, I think we'll kick things off here, and then I'll give people can always join in as things go. So, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us again. Event number 4 of the 5-event series. So we're moving up there. Today we have VMware joining us today, and we're going to talk. I'll do a quick intro on David in a moment, but basically just super excited to have them on board. Just so much to talk to about here, so many elements. Definitely, obviously, a name that's familiar that you've seen for a long time, and many elements of networking and of your environment. So, and then tonight, after David has walked us through his presentation today, we'll switch over tonight at 8 p.m. It's going to be a virtual cocktail making session. So we've had wine tasting, we've had whiskey tasting, we've had virtual beer tasting. And it's been very interesting and very interesting to hear everybody's opinion. So I am personally also a cocktail fan, so I'm looking forward to tonight very much. And thank you VMware again for helping us sponsor that. So looking forward to that very, very much. A few housekeeping items. Please feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation. Now, attendees for this session is in mute or marked as an attendee. So please submit any questions you have on the chat box there. We'll get to them. I'll make sure that if David is mid-presentation, we'll make sure we get them posed. Otherwise, if it's something that you want to ask at the end, we will have some time at the end for some questions as well. So feel free to have that as well. We're recording the presentation, so we'll make this available for you if you realize afterwards there was something neat that you wanted to hear again and have a look at. So don't hesitate on that. And if you have any further questions about VMware, the series, CDW, as always, you have your CDW account manager, but by now you also know Mackenzie and myself, so our contact info is all throughout the invites. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us either. Again, I've gotten to shorten down my slides quite a bit because of the audience starting to getting to know us much better, but the one I like to point out here just quickly again is, so with CDW partnered with VMware, we have presence across the country. So and like the internal running joke is like more or less every city where there's a hockey team, and then so that sort of gives you a rough idea. But in some of them where we do not even necessarily have physical head office, we do have local employees such as out on the Eastern Seaboard. So definitely presence there as well to work with our customers. Now on CDW security, so today we're going to be talking with the VMware. I think one of the key things here that we've seen a lot, and just like where we have been working with a lot of customers, is around VDI, remote session, endpoint security, right? And so if you look at this sheet here, it's really the rapidly changing threat types, right? So we're seeing the environment shift on us. We're seeing, and again, like for most organizations, work from home or remote access is not a new thing, but I think the magnitude and the pace and the change at which it happened is. A lot of our customers are starting to get a handle on the actual rollout and getting people set up. And so we're seeing like sort of the next round of challenges that now comes in around remote support and actually securing these endpoints over a longer term as we see people just using this. And just right now, I know a lot of our customers does not have an immediate definite target date for back in office. So this will continue for a little bit, definitely going into the future as well. So very excited to hear about some of the endpoint items. This slide here, a very busy chart, but basically the big one for me here is just, endpoint security. You'll notice that that is embedded here. Also, like just a remote access and securing different types of connectivity. Now, again, when you look at that remote access, that attack vector and how that's changed or maybe shifted in your business, the other part that we find we help our customers a lot with is on the risk advisory services side. To do potential business impact assessments or threat risk assessments and make sure that how the new norm is being experienced by the organization is interpreted correctly in terms of threat vectors, risk, and in your security program. So with that, I'm going to start introducing David here. So today on the line with us from VMware, we have David Balkar. David is a security strategist at VMware. He's had about 18 years of experience in security research, network pen testing, incident response, computer forensics, so very in-depth, understands how attackers think, how to attack, and then how to counter and secure. Right now, David is at VMware Carbon Black, and he's responsible for sales activities around really everything in the Carbon Black portfolio, so including EDR, app control, cloud endpoint, and a number of other suites that he'll talk to you about. But again, very relevant, very important for us in our relationship with VMware to see that integration and that play of the security that we can extend further into it. David also speaks regularly at different security conferences, and he has a number of security memberships where he is part of, such as the High Technology Crime Investigation Association, just to make sure that he contributes and he's involved in the community and understand new trends and things that are happening. So at this stage, David, I'm going to hand over to you. Welcome, and thank you for being here with us today.
Oh, thank you so much.
Right, sharing switched over for you in a second there.
All right. Great. So yeah, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining today. I feel kind of left out because I didn't get my drink package to make my drink tonight, but that's okay. I don't really drink, so but it's always fun to watch the crazy cocktails being made for sure. That's always cool, especially when you go to like Vegas or some of these resort towns. So today my talk is really around, this working remotely and how do we do it securely and how do we protect these distributed endpoints all over the place? Because, I've had customers go from 99% in-house to all of a sudden now they've got 99% working remotely. So we'll talk through some strategies on that and kind of go through that as well. Awesome. So here's my Twitter address. I know Twitter is kind of a FOD right now, but if you want to see funny security stories or cat videos, feel free to reach out to me. There's also my email address if you want to tag me on there. And somebody I also corrected me, that's actually not WMware, it's actually VMware.com. I need to change that one more time. I don't know how that keeps getting changed, but I will get that changed. Awesome. So basically some of the things we're going to go through today is this, what's this rapid shift to distributed endpoints and some of the challenges? What about the SOC teams and the CSO and CISO, dealing with? What about application security and how do we remediate and do a response to these things out there? And we'll talk through the whole thing, security hygiene. I'm real big on that. And Q&A through the whole thing. So if you have any questions during the talk, please feel free to stop me. Pop in a question and I'll definitely get it answered, and I'll definitely answer more at the end and tonight as well. Awesome. So I would start off with, what's really happening out there, right? We see all this crazy stuff out there, everything from, APTs hitting country versus country. You've got China and Russia and Iran and North Korea and all these crazy things, and DDoS attacks, and ransomware is still just huge and getting bigger, it seems like, every day. It seems like once we shut down one piece of it, it pops up in another way. That's a huge problem we see, and it's not getting any smaller. And now with this whole pandemic that we've seen around the world, is now more phishing attacks are happening because now employees kind of lose a layer of protection, right? When they were at the office working on company equipment, that kind of stuff. A lot of companies have gone to, hey, BYOD, how do we secure that? That's even a bigger challenge. So why are organizations struggling so much? Well, like this funny picture, if you leave the lock off, the little control box there, people can just stop and grab the keyboard and start typing. And you always have to be on the search for rogue pandas for sure. I live out here in New Hampshire, and it was funny, the last couple of weeks we've had a moose walking around, and people have been taking pictures all over the town of where this moose keeps going. So that's our rogue our moose on Rampage story there. So one thing I always see is, we put all these big walls up, right? We got these firewalls and all WAFs and all these other things. Well, what do the attackers do? They're just driving around that stuff. And this is making it easier now, instead of having, a few remote people to having a lot. Now you've got a bunch of different holes that you've got to plug and figure out, how do I get secure access to my employees securely and keep the bad guys out, right? That's definitely a huge price. like, it was said earlier that, I do travel a lot, or I did travel a lot until hopefully that will get back to normal at some point here soon. Is, I give between, 40 and 60 speeches a year. And I was giving a keynote speech at a conference this last year. And I got in the elevator bank and I was like, because they told me at the front desk, you need to use your key to get into the floors. So I was like, okay, great. I see the thing. And then I see this card hanging there. And I was like, oh, you've got to be kidding me. So, of course, doing what I do, I tried it. And yes, that card did work and it did go to every secure floor that they had. So did my card, worked for my floor. But so I went and talked to the manager. I said, why do y'all have that in there? I mean, that is just security 101. And he goes, well, people forget their cards, or, they don't want to take it out of their bag. And it's like, man, it's okay for a little inconvenience to make sure you're securing your environment for sure. Or you can, if that's your idea of security, you might as well just, duct tape your security cameras up. So I took that a couple years ago at a Subway restaurant. Really, really sad. So I think one of the biggest thing as defenders that we have is not only do we have to defend the environment, but we have this constantly evolving environment, right? So now we have everything from new laws and standards and more transparency and rules and regulations and compliance. Um, it's tough. It's tough being the defender because now I've got to do all this stuff. The bad guys on the other side don't have all that. They don't care about requirements or compliance or laws or standards, right? All they care about is getting into your environment and stealing your IP or shutting you down or taking your money, right? That's a huge thing. And I really wish there was this paradigm shift with the risk side of the house and the IT security side of the house. And a lot of companies, they rely on the security people to make all this happen, and don't take that burden off, right? They need to be some separation and some better workings in there. And it's just, I think it's going to come from like the compliance bodies plus with new laws and stuff to make that easier. It's definitely a huge challenge. I'd love to hear in the comments or whatnot if y'all are seeing that as well. Time is not on our side. Why isn't time on our side? Well, because you just don't know when, right? All of a sudden, poof, in one day, everybody went down to, hey, we're working from home instantly. I had customers that were offline for, 2, almost 3 weeks, scrambling, trying to figure out, okay, how do I get them equipment? How do I get them access? Do I need to redo my apps or my apps in the cloud? Are they, on-prem apps? How do I get those back out? It was crazy. You have to be prepared for a lot of this, and not just like a DR plan, but an actual, um, uh, a better work from home plan. And a lot of companies have done really pretty darn well. I mean, there's definitely some that have really, really struggled, and they're still struggling today. So, an attacker only has to be successful once, right? But the defender has to defend 110% of attacks. And the reason I say that is because, yeah, the attacker, you have to defend 100% of their attacks, but you got another 10% coming from your rules and regulations and law and all this other stuff that you have to maintain. Now, once the attacker's in the environment, they have to be 100%, right? It kind of flips because if they're not 100%, they're gonna mess up and you're gonna catch them a whole lot easier too. So that's always a tough battle for sure. So what about the distributed endpoint challenges, right? We've seen this huge surge in traffic from unknown networks all over the world, right? Increase in BYOD, whether that is BYOD from bring your own device or bring your own network, right? I work from home anyways. I've always worked from home, and the biggest challenge that people's go is, well, Dave, how is your network set up? Well, I actually have like 4 or 5 networks in my house. I've got one for my IoT devices. I've got one for my lab that I do testing in and research. And then I've got a work network to go out. And then I've got, for the rest of the people in the house to use the systems to do stuff. So it's always I do this very segmented across the board, so it doesn't cross. But most people don't have that, right? And it's really really tough. And I really encourage companies to, hey, if I'm letting people work from home, how do I help them be more secure? Whether that's having lunch and learns, or hey, let me spend a few $1,000s and buy a bunch of new more secure wireless networking devices so they can create a separate wireless environment or wired network for that matter, for their work environment, so they can separate it from the rest of their house, so that traffic's not intermingled, and make it that much harder for attackers, right? So endpoints are everywhere for sure. This is a perfect example. I took this picture last year. I was getting my oil changed. Yes, that invoice down there in the bottom left. I wish my name would have come out clear, but yes, definitely mine. And I cannot make this up. It for sure said password 123456 for their credit card machine. And the biggest thing was when I saw this, I was like, oh man, okay, please tear that piece of paper up. Remember your password. Better yet, change the password. She actually called the bank, and the bank said, well, we don't really change those passwords. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. That's just the kind of security posture to do, which is kind of crazy. So what about more challenges? Like I said, you've got these attack volumes. We've seen this significant increase in the CV-19 related attacks, especially for opportunistic attackers. Nation states, they're attacking each other because they're going after the research, right? If you didn't know, about 4 days ago, Russia announced, hey, we've got a vaccine. We're going to certify it. Not a lot of noise on that, believe it or not. I thought it would be bigger story than it was, and it just kind of went poof in one day. Probably because a lot of people didn't believe them, or they want proof, right? But you see a lot of that in the healthcare. I mean, I deal with a lot of healthcare customers, and they're getting targeted left and right. They're trying to see, hey, what's happening, what kind of research you're doing on COVID, and anything else that you're doing for that matter. And then you've got a lot of SLED organizations, which is your state and local government education, that are having huge problems because now they've traditionally been everyone's inside, right? We're on campus, we're learning, we're doing our work, just like government jobs. You're doing processing and everything there, and now you've made this huge shift. My local town was almost shut down for 2 months, not doing anything. Well, closer to 3 now, where they couldn't process registrations. They told literally people to put on their, like, they go buy a new car, the plate is only good here for like 15 days. They said, just write on the plate, I bought this car on this date. That's it. So when the cop drove by you, they would say, okay, well, there's nothing we can do until it was July. They were doing that. Now it's August, so it's been moved back again. So to do that, it's really, really crazy. Again, endpoints are everywhere from me coming back from Germany back to Boston, or your local supermarket. How do we protect all this stuff? So are you working from home? Hopefully this is not your workstation. No, this is not my workstation. I just thought this was a funny picture. I think a lot of people's is like this, trying to keep up in the last couple of months. It's been a little crazy, for sure. This is what we want our desk to look like. I mean, that would be awesome. That's more of what kind of mine looks like. I got a bunch of screens. And then this is where we definitely want to be, right? But even in all 4 of these, how do we protect those endpoints across the board, right? We also have to look at what's happening at the SOC team level. So we're doing this traditional workflow where we're doing incidents, the SOC is handling it, and dealing back down to the device security, right? So now we've gone to this multiple networks, back to a remote SOC, back to the corporate network. So that, just like I said, more and more and more, how do we deal with this? And one of the biggest things is, virtualization has really, really helped here. And if you look at what VMware's done, really doing some huge promotions around Workspace ONE and vCenter and VCF out there to be able to get those apps, whether it's on Horizon or other platforms, get those apps to those customers securely and give them single sign-on, give the remote SOC some more visibility. And from a Carbon Black perspective, that was one of the biggest reasons why VMware purchased Carbon Black last October, was with the visibility that we have. We have more visibility than anybody out there, what's happening on the endpoint from an attack perspective. So we can provide that to the SOC teams. So with a lightweight agent, a single console, single sensor, you can deploy it to all your remote stations out there, whether it's BYOD or it's company owned. I'm sure there's some policy stuff in there you have to do. But as far as that, you get that visibility, and then you can get that EDR functionality remotely from one console through the cloud. And that's proven awesome for a lot of customers, where they could rapidly I'm talking within days, being able to get their entire staff back online and working securely. So some of the challenges, of course, for the CISO and executives are that reduced visibility, right? We're seeing SOC burnout at this point. They've just been way overburdened. You've got workload management. How do we manage all these workloads now that we've had to spin up in the last, 4 or 5 months now? And now, how do we balance that business continuity with security? Well, I don't know if it's really a balance. I think it's more of it just has to be done, right? I know companies that were putting stuff out there that was not secure, for sure, and then they've had to go back and go, oh man, we need to get that secure. And that was one thing that's really, really good with, on the VMware side with Workspace ONE and the Carbon Black side is being able to get that control, be able to get that visibility, get those apps in the hands of the people who need them in a secure fashion. So how do we do some of this stuff on the securing the collaboration apps, right? Doing VPNs, making sure you're labeling the stuff so you know what level of security that it needs. Also, how do I enable my SOC teams to become threat hunters, look for more and more threats out there, and also being able to provide those preventative actions, right? What about separating home from work networks? It's tough. That's why I'm a big proponent on companies looking at their employees saying, hey, would this make sense? Can we use some of our IT staff to maybe, once a week troubleshoot some of that stuff and help people from home be able to, they're normally not set up for that. They just go and buy a wireless gateway or something and put it in their home, and they never change the password. They don't update the firmware. But how can we help them do that for sure? Be really proactive across that. What about some security hygiene? Everything from looking at the phishing attacks, physical security. I work in a basement. It's locked. If I told you my whole setup, you would freak out probably and go, "Oh my God!" But all my stuff is separated. I've got physical security, I've got logical security, and then I've got um, uh, basically data security across the board with my multiple networks across, right? What about IoT mobile? How do we control, how do we, not really control, but how do we secure that stuff? Because a lot of people are, I've talked to people that uh, their company didn't have laptops at the point. They said, okay, use your iPad, well, or Android tablet. How do we get those apps out there? So something like Workspace ONE to provide that connectivity so they can open those apps on those devices. What about VPNs and endpoints? We got to keep that up to date for sure. Multi-factor authentication, we know about that. Application control whitelisting, definitely that's more on the corporate side to do that, because a lot of times once you start looking at stuff, solutions around that, like on the Carbon Black app control side, most BYOD, home users are not going to want to put that stuff on their systems, but they really need to talk to their IT staff about that. What can we do? How do we deliver security updates even when outside the network? That's been a huge thing. You got to be able to do. That's one big benefit of moving to the cloud is it doesn't matter where we are. We can update it, keep it updated, and make sure we can monitor it for sure. I'm a big fan of communication, so definitely communicate all those new risk factors to customers, so their end users understand. Hey, you're going to be seeing a bunch of stuff coming. We're going to block as much as we can, but they're going to find ways to get around spam filters and whatnot to do stuff. You're going to see. I'm seeing spams on phones. I've got one of my test phones that I just let sit there. It's got a really old phone number, so it's been in the system for a long time, and I see spam text messages. Oh, here, click here for the latest updates on COVID-19 status, and it was a garbage link, right? It just takes you to. It was a piece of malware actually for an Android device, which is kind of crazy. Do better tips and resources around securing those home environments, like I said earlier, for sure. What about identifying those vulnerabilities and patches and validation remotely? And that's what we were just talking. So as you can see, single console, you can do audit remediation through the cloud with the Carbon Black Cloud. The CBC is what we call it. And it's that layer, it adds on to that layered prevention, right? And it's really about with the what we call endpoint standard and even the threat hunting piece is all about that single experience, right? A lightweight agent, single console, single sensor, and full visibility. So I can see everything that's happening on that machine from a threat perspective, all binaries, everything that executes. And how do we block that stuff that's like 0 days, right? People always ask me that. It's like, well, we're a next gen AV replacement, so we are actually fully behavior. So we can, of course, we still do some signatures. You're going to catch that known malware really, really fast just on a signature. I mean, that's fine. That's easy. But how do we catch those unknown binaries that are like using lull bins, like living off the land binaries, like your PowerShell and stuff like that? How do we catch those apps doing something bad? Well, that's where the Carbon Black Cloud comes in. The perspective of that sensor is being able to look at those behaviors and say, okay, hey, yeah, you started your email. We can see that you clicked on an email, and then all of a sudden your spreadsheet opened up a PowerShell. Well, that's not normal. We can look at those very, very quickly, and you can put rules around that that's saying, nope, that's not valid. There's no way that would happen. I actually did a demo for a customer yesterday where I showed a live attack, and the attack I was showing was trying to wipe out the volume shadow copies on a Windows server. And so I ran the command, and of course the Carbon Black Cloud without any policy changes, just the standard policy that comes out of the box. Of course it blocked it without a problem. I tried to run it from the command line. I tried to run it remotely. I tried to run it through a piece of ransomware. Same thing. It didn't matter how it got there. It still was able to block it every single time. So one thing I like to talk to people about is this idea of this cognitive attack loop. We actually developed this a couple years ago. You've probably heard of like the Lockheed Martin kill chain or the MITRE attack framework. They're very linear. This is very circular, right? So from an attacker perspective, people say, oh, you do this, then you do that. Well, it's not really true. I've been pen testing for a long time. And people say, oh, how did you break into that environment or get into that bank or insurance or healthcare? Everyone is unique, right? I don't always do recon and infiltrate or maintain and manipulate or execute and exfiltrate in a certain order. It's always probably something different each single time. Just depends on the attack and what I'm trying to do. And attackers are doing the same thing, right? If I throw up a million phishing emails out there, I'm not doing recon and infiltrate. What I'm trying to do is execute and exfiltrate and then maintain, right? So I'm a different order. So that's something to think about. What I ask for everybody here is go back to your own environment and work with the security team and says, what do we have in each of these boxes? What do we have as a defensive layer around prevention and response and remediation across any of these three? What do we have in our tool set to make that happen? So to do that, you look at the cognitive defense loop, right, around prevention, detection, respond. We know we can't prevent everything, right? Nobody can. If they do, it would put everyone out of business, right? It hasn't happened yet. We'd love to see that happen. I know I would love to see it happen, that's for sure. But whatever we can't prevent, right? Let's say it's a nation state attacker or whatnot attacking me. How do I detect it and how do I respond to it as quickly as possible? That's a huge, huge, huge thing. So this all comes down to a great thing that we've done here at VM is this whole idea of intrinsic security, right? How do we bake in security across the board so it's not bolted on, it's actually built in. And that's where like the Carbon Black Cloud is being built in across the entire platform around endpoints, networking. If you look at some of the other acquisitions like Pivotal and Lastline, so we can get that Kubernetes and containerization security plus the networking side all from a single console. Really, really exciting times to be here, that's for sure. If you've never read The Art of War, I encourage you to read it. It's a really fascinating novel. I've had to go through it several times to really just grasp the whole concepts of it. But being in the military myself, I had a lot of these concepts and drenched in me for many years. But I find more and more that relate directly to IT security and what we're dealing with in the cyber world, right? And I love this phrase. And the second sentence is, if you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer defeat. I can't say that enough, right? So if you don't know what the enemy's doing and they're attacking you, and your teams have no idea what's coming at you, that's going to be a big problem. So I'm really a big proponent on training security teams. Try to get them the best training you can around some of the newest attacks out there. So you know how to defend your network. So you know what's inside your network. So you know what's, if it's an AIX attack against my network, I don't care. I don't run AIX. But I need to know exactly what attacks are hitting me and why, where they're going. So if there's no questions, I'll leave you with Dave's top 10. So always treat your network as a hostile environment. Always assume that you breach.
Dave, sorry, this is Tio here. So I was scrambling for my mute button. We have one question on the line. Evo asked, what is Carbon Black / VMware's approach to IoT security, and specifically around so-called air-gapped networks?
There's two things, right? For an air-gapped network, so we have two on-prem pieces. So what we call, one is called app control and one is called enterprise EDR. The app control provides full application whitelisting. That means nothing will run unless you allow it, right? The other side of the house is your full EDR, where you're going to be able to do response, live response, be able to get to that session and get all that metadata and see everything that's happening on that environment. So you can do full threat hunting. And that's on-prem. So that's not even the cloud. That's totally on-prem. And you can go out there and see all that in an air-gapped network. So a lot of our government customers and stuff like that use both of those products for those air-gapped networks.
Perfect, thanks.
You're welcome. All right, so 10, treat your network as hostile. Number 9, nobody's immune from malware infection. We already know this. Have your post-breach strategy ready. Just like I have, you have a DR plan, just like I have a fire plan here at the house if something burns down. We know where the family's going to meet, how we're going to get out, how we're going to get the animals, blah, blah, blah. Don't forget about the insider threat. Now everyone's an insider at this point, right? The way it's looking at. I've done a lot of insider threat investigations over the years. Number 7, always do number 2. Okay, we'll come back. I know this is a family show. We'll come back to number 2. Log everything, have unfiltered data, right? I believe in this 30, 60, 90 thing. 30 days, I log literally everything. Then it's 60 days, I cut some of that back. 90 days, a little bit more. So, for storage requirements. But definitely have that unfiltered data on the Carbon Black cloud and gives you that ability to do that, have that unfiltered data. I mean, that's the biggest challenge that people have. If I don't see it happening on my network, I don't know when I've been breached. I can't tell you how many times that we've installed in companies and they start finding stuff. It's like, oh my God, we didn't even know this was in our environment because we couldn't see it. They were living off the land binaries where a lot of security tools are looking for malware specifically. They're not looking at the behaviors of what's happening. Number 5, backup, test your backups. Even though I'm working at home, I've got, to not go overboard here, I have a couple NAS systems here. I've got one just for backups, and that NAS is backed up to another offsite location. So I can back up all my machines in my environment. It's encrypted on my NAS, and then it transfers encrypt over the network, and then it's on an encrypted NAS somewhere else. So even if someone steals one of my NASs, I don't care because it's all encrypted. For sure, back up your stuff. Train your security staff again on that 80-20 rule, where 80% of the time they're doing their day-to-day job, they're kicking butt, taking names, and that 20% of their job is training. Always trying to stay up to date as much as possible. That also helps prevent a lot of burnout, believe it or not. Security awareness for everyone, and not this, click HR thing. Yep, I'm certified for the year, but real good security awareness. What are you doing at home? Are you using a secure router? When's the last time you upgraded your firmware? Here's some of the new phishing examples that we've had, that kind of stuff. Oh, here's number 2, patch, and refer back to number 7, right? So now it's a programming joke. If you got that, I can't hear y'all laughing, but I'm sure you are. It's a programming joke, gets you back into an infinite loop to where you just do this over and over and over again. Definitely good times. And number 1 for Dave's top 10 was Ryan Reynolds was not available for this. I know he's a favorite Canadian, so he was not available. So I'd love to answer any and more questions if you have them.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. Mackenzie, any other questions, or if anybody on the line, if you have any questions, fire away right now, please. Got a few minutes left there, so we'll go for a little bit. Maybe while people potentially tee up some questions there, David, I have one question for you. What do you find? What's some of the biggest either challenges or changes in thinking that customers have to go through moving from a traditional AV platform into something with like a Carbon Black endpoint with an AI response and just a different way of like with so much more visibility and insight and how it behaves? What's some of that when you see customers transition? Like, what is some of the changes or thinkings or things the customers have to be aware of?
I think the biggest thing is, the level of noise that goes down, right? Because you say, oh, well, I've got this, I'm using such and such and such and such, and they're all signature based. So they're just hoping that it catches whatever. That's a big one. Seeing the different types of noise, being able to see stuff in their environment that they've never seen before. That's been one of the biggest wake up calls that I think customers have come back to me for the last several years and goes, Dave, we didn't even know these apps were doing this. It's not just, like I'll give you a trick of the trade when I'm breaking into a network. I love to use apps that they already have, whether it's Notepad or Calculator, .exe. I use those because they're vulnerable, and then I can use those to jump onto other things. And they would have never seen that. Their traditional AVs out there can't catch that kind of stuff. So that's a huge thing. And then the other thing is just the pure visibility. Your traditional AVs don't give you that visibility, right? It just says something was blocked or not, but not, hey, this looks suspicious because someone clicked on a spreadsheet, it opened up PowerShell, and it started writing to the Windows registry. That's very suspicious, right? So that's a huge thing. I think that's been one of the biggest eye openers that I've seen with companies of all sizes, just the level of visibility.
Let's see. We have a question here from Sirius. He's saying, does the solution work for servers? How much effort is required in fine tuning it usually?
It does work on servers. It takes about 6 to 9 months. I'm just kidding. It's actually already tuned. I mean, you really don't have to do anything. Once the sensor's installed, you assign it a policy. What most people do is that when they first start installing, for the first few days or so, they'll put in a monitor policy. So you'll see everything that could go wrong, all the bad stuff and all the good stuff. That way you can look at the alerts, and then you can tune your policies. And actually, we have a great professional support services where they work with you on policies. Now, we have 3 policies that come with it: monitored, standard, and advanced. And we want you to get to the advanced level as fast as possible, right? You want to be able to do more and more lockdown and add much more layer of security. But as far as tuning, I've seen customers get up and going within 2 days, and they're already on the standard policy. They've already modified it. They're adding their own stuff in there and putting controls around their environment. The learning curve is so small. I mean, most of my demos, when I show people this, are between 30 minutes and an hour, and they're sold on it. They're just like, oh, wow, I wish we had this visibility. I wish we had this kind of, fine-grained control over what we need to do and catch these bad things.
Perfect. Thank you. I have a question for you. So when you're talking about logging and visibility, what I find interesting in working with EDR, MDR, endpoint style solutions is sometimes the difference between logging to the actual portal/management center for the solution versus SIM integration and offloading that logs and what I can see elsewhere. What is the balance between Carbon Black endpoint that you'd recommend for that SIM integration piece, and like how does that threat hunting and the back and forth of information work on that?
That's an awesome question. So one of the biggest things with Carbon Black is the principle of full and open API access. So we have like over 140 different relationships with other vendors out there, like, Splunk, Logarithm, QRadar, all your big SIMs. And it doesn't matter. I had one about 8 months ago that it was a SIM that a fairly large company here in the US, they built it themselves. and within a matter of 2 days, they had it integrated into the Carbon Black Cloud with our APIs. They could get even all that rich data. I will tell you, I've got some companies that are like really, really huge, 140,000 employees. They don't do a lot in our console. They pull everything out into their own SIM and do it from there because they have very strict different threat hunting rules.
Right.
But I've been working with them, trying to get them look in the console, look how fast we can get this information, and that's been a huge benefit. So you get the best of both worlds, right? You get a very threat centric outline inside the console, plus you can also pull it out and put it into a SIM and do even more analysis on. So out of the box, you get 30 days of everything, right? All the data. So I've got customers that, all they do is they want to keep the data for 6 months. That's great. They have batch jobs that run every day, pull out the data for that day or that week so they can keep it in their SIM. But you don't have to. I've got customers. I just was working with a customer the other day. They got 2,000 endpoints, and they don't have a SIM. And now that they've been on it for several weeks now, going at it, they're like, man, I don't think we even need a SIM because we have everything that we need in this one console.
Right. And just so you know, that is very much aligned with what we're seeing as well. So it's still sort of that balance between threat hunting and data, and then the actual SIM element. Now, what's interesting in Canada is we have the Canadian Data Privacy Act, which forms part of PIPEDA, which is our PII standard. And the one thing that's new is if you're actually working with customer PII, any metadata associated with an attack investigation that you're doing actually has to be kept for up to 2 years, just if there was impact to PII. So, again, like that's one area, for instance, where we see with a lot of our customers that leveraging the built-in dashboards is great, but there is still a value. No, that doesn't have to be a SIM integration. It could be offloading to a log server, syslogging the logs and storing it. But that's usually one that we notice as well. That's important for us. Just a quick question, another question from Sarah's here. Does the solution support Linux systems, i.e. Red Hat, CentOS, AIX, or any limitations around those?
Yeah, so currently we support 5 different distributions of Linux, which is your Red Hat, CentOS, SUSE, Ubuntu, Oracle, Linux, and it wasn't AIX. There was another one in there. I'd have to look up what that 5th one is. I know there was another one in there, but we're always adding more, and we're trying to make them as feature complete as possible between the Windows and Mac sensors as well. I think the biggest limitation right now is we're under this mentality of do no harm, right? Once you start poking around in the kernel, we're trying to do as much as we can without having to tie into the kernel, so that people can update their kernel, and that's tough on Linux. But we do have full EDR, we do have audit remediation on the Linux side, and then we do have some prevention capabilities right now. And by the end of the year, we're going to be adding any more, and then first quarter next year, it's even going to be greater as well.
Perfect. So I have one more question for you. So this is interesting for me. So with Carbon Black, back in the day, Carbon Black really rushed onto the scene. And one of the things as a security community we trusted them for more than just about any other product was the concept of whitelisting, right? And whitelisting sort of had this wonderful concept around it that instead of being worried about signatures catching the bad things, a whitelist would tell you what the good things are and everything else you discard. So it's sort of implicit security, and it really allows you to lock it down. But needless to say, the challenges with that was as soon as you have a server with multiple processes or multiple, if you store your application, your database on the same server, you started running into complexity issues around what that whitelisting policy should look like. Now with cloud, we're helping a lot of our customers design for cloud properties, which means we're actually doing scalable instances that is very much focused on one function, so that instead of having a big server that I try to multiply, I have the functionality split out, and that is what I scale as required. So if my web front end is getting it hard, I can scale web instances of my servers. If my database is overtaxed, I scale database instances to or add compute and storage to that to sort of serve the need. Have you seen, what's your thought on whitelisting, and have you seen, like, do you see a correlation or a specific where alignment where cloud is actually more powerful with whitelisting because of this ability to narrow down the functionality that an instantiated instance of anything would have, of something would have?
Mm-hmm. Now, that's an awesome question. Oh, bonus points for that one. Extra drinks. There we go.
There you go.
I think the biggest thing is I think they work hand in hand, right? I've got customers that both use the Carbon Black app protection, which is your full application whitelisting, plus they use the Carbon Black cloud to get that visibility. What the app whitelisting doesn't give you is that all that full visibility, right? Because it's doing an and or, right? This works or this doesn't work. That's it. That's black and white. Very, very simple. And I think they both have their place, right? So, and I know the next question after this would be is like, oh, well, Dave, are you going to take that app whitelisting and put it into the cloud product? There is discussions around that as we speak on that as well. But in today's environment, we don't. But I've got plenty of customers that run both simultaneously on their endpoints.
Right.
But you have to look at the use cases. That's where it comes. Now, I would not put the app whitelisting on my home users' workstations. It's just too much, right? It would be horrendous job to sit there and try to make a policy that works, because not everyone does the same thing on their machines. But if you look at some of our biggest customers around the app whitelisting and stuff, where they can go full lockdown is like retail, restaurants, where those are specialized machines that are only doing one or two apps, and that's all they need to run. You know, some of the biggest retailers in Canada and the US, you go into their stores right now and there's Carbon Black on those machines protecting all those endpoints, because those registers and stuff, they're full PCs, but they're just running a couple different apps. That's all they need to run, which is great. But they also have, one of our biggest ones also is trying to get that visibility into what else is happening. So from I want to see, just because there's a sidebar attack happening, I might not see it in my application whitelist. I'll see the deny, but how did the attack start? How are they trying to break into my box and try to get around it? I mean, that's a huge thing.
Perfect, thank you. So I think that brings us up to 11:50. I've asked a ton of questions. We've had a few from the audience as well. David, you're joining us tonight, so if the people on the line, if you think of anything else, or if there's something that you want to ask David in a little bit more relaxed setting, or warrants an in-person discussion, David's going to be on the line with us tonight. So feel free to share that. One other quick note as well, I noticed that for the mixed drinks tonight, there is a recommendation if you can get your hands on orange. I think that to me spells we're probably going to be looking at some old fashions as part of the mixing tonight. So, but if you do have some time, grab an orange before the session tonight. And then other than that, David, thank you so much. That was really informative. That was really good. I really enjoyed that. Really appreciate your time, and thank you so much for sponsoring today's session. So look forward to seeing you tonight. And then I think I'm gonna hand where are we now, 9 minutes back to the team. So if you're Eastern Central, like Eastern Standard like us, then gives you 9 minutes to get ready for a good lunchtime and hopefully enjoy some good lunch today.
Perfect.
So
thank you.
Thank you. I'm just quickly seeing here, Mackenzie is sending me one quick message. Just want to make sure I don't miss anything. There we go. No, that's good. Mackenzie just said, remember the oranges. So there you go, people. Oranges tonight, and we'll make sure when we sync up at some stage, I make up for the drink you're missing tonight. But thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it. Have a great rest of your Monday, and we really look forward to seeing you tonight.